How did I come to do what I'm doing? I fell in love with, I was always the loud kid growing up, so I fell in love with theater pretty quickly. It was a place where I could kind of channel my energy and be a little rambunctious and not get in trouble for it. I studied theater in college, so I had my bachelor's degree at Florida State University, and then moved to New York City after that. In the interim, my last semester of college, I studied in London for a semester, which was a big gift. We got to be supported by some theater professionals there and saw a lot of theater. I got a taste of living in a big city, and it was a great experience because I knew I could do it. So I grew up in Alabama. I'm originally from Alabama. So getting out of the South was, I kind of always knew I wanted to move and not be there. And I think a lot of it was because I was drawn to the arts. And where I grew up, there's a lot of beautiful things about where I grew up, but a strong arts community isn't one of them, unfortunately. Not yet, anyway. So I moved to New York after college, and I worked as an actor, auditioned a whole lot, worked on a lot of small projects, and kind of found a bit of a niche in the community with a lot of playwrights. And I got really excited about working on new works, which was just a really cool beast. I always thought I wanted to work in the classics and be a Shakespearean actress, a Jacobean actress, and I do love doing that stuff, and it's a great balance, but it was really exciting to be involved with these kind of grassroots theater companies and working on brand new plays and having parts written for me for my strengths, and being able to have that kind of creative input in a way that you get to be the first person doing that role ever. And such a huge gift. So I worked in New York. I was there for 11 years. You start doing the math, you can figure out how old I am. So I lived in New York for 11 years, and the last 2 years I was there, I was just becoming increasingly more frustrated with not performing as much as I would like, not getting the roles that I thought I should be doing. And a friend of mine had asked me to perform a 20-minute solo piece that he had written called Mothering Instinct. A very talented playwright friend named Chris Van Strander. He's still working at New York. So he asked me to do this solo piece, this one-woman piece at a theater festival. And I loved his writing. It's really dark and beautiful, and he does a lot of historical research. He writes great women. So I did this piece, and for me that was really it was a really pivotal moment in my artistic career and my creative life, because it's such a different relationship with the audience, and it's something I really fell in love with, being able to have that intimate relationship and that responsibility, and having it change every night depending on who's in the room and what they're giving you. And I mean, that's the case with an ensemble piece too, but so much more so when there's nobody else on stage with you. So I performed that a couple of times, and I said, Chris, I'm really interested in developing a full-length solo piece. I think this is something I'd really love to do. And honestly, it started out probably more as a showcase idea, like feeling like this is something I can put up in New York and get people to see, and then they'll love me and cast me in other things. And so he said, yeah, and he's like, I love watching you do this piece, and I totally support that. So I wrote 2 other characters to kind of go in to kind of create this kind of 3-act 60-minute show called Afterlife, which was my first solo piece. Chris and I collaborated on that. And I produced a workshop in New York, and then I toured it through Canada over the next 2 years, and Canada and the US. There's just a really strong network of festivals throughout Canada, so it's really easy to tour through there. And through that process, I became a producer, and I became a stronger writer, and it's taking on that kind of a role. You learn a lot because you can't afford to hire anybody to do your marketing or your publicity. So you just learn in a trial by fire way what works and what doesn't work, how to deal with the press, and this is all in addition to just becoming a better artist too. Is the more you do it, I love touring work, and that's the thing that I've discovered, that as far as creating and producing work, and my focus is creating things that will have a life beyond the one production, because, I mean, quite honestly, financially, it makes more sense. You put all this time and energy into developing a piece and then perform it for 2 weeks and then it's over. But also just being able to tour. When I toured, I was on the road for 4 months straight in 2009, touring Afterlife. And it's really fun to see how much the show changed from that first month to the fourth month. By that fourth month, I was so in love with that show, because I felt like, tweaking it along the way and seeing who responded to what, and being able to talk to audiences and see which character they identified with. It was a really fantastic experience, and to be able to just deal with community in that way and get to know a brand new city through the audience and through how they react to the work. So I get bit by the bug, and I loved having that much control over my creative life. I was also at a point in my life where I kind of hit my wall with New York City and felt like I needed a break to try to find a higher quality of life and a place where I could produce work in a more financially accessible way. I mean, just renting space in New York is ridiculous. So at the same time I was touring in 2009, I scheduled my tour to go through Seattle and Minneapolis, because I wanted to check out both cities, because they were both great theater towns and places where I thought that I would enjoy living. I had never been to either city. So I came here for the Fringe in 2009, performed Afterlife, and I went to Seattle for 2 weeks, booked some shows there. Got back to New York in September after I toured, and decided Minneapolis was it. Sold all my stuff, packed up my things, and moved here in December 1st. Not the smartest time to move to Minnesota, but I just felt like it was, it's just one of those times in your life where you're like, this is a shift, this is a change, this is what's going to have to happen right now. And if I don't do it now, I'm nervous I might chicken out in 4 months. So I was just ready, so I did it, and I've been here for 4 years now, almost 4 years now. Towards the end of moving on to Expiration Date, the play that we're talking directly about today, is around the time that the year before I left, 2 years before I left, I lost 2 very dear friends of mine to different diseases. And I spent my best friend of 15 years, my high school girlhood friend, died of leukemia. And then a year later, I lost a very dear friend of mine in New York. He was like a big brother to me, 30 and 35. And once I got on the other side of that, once you kind of get past the grief and the loss, just kind of like thinking about the experience and how I wanted to create a piece to honor them in some way. There was something, I wasn't quite sure what. And I just started thinking about the whole process of being with them in hospitals, being in a room where death was in the room with us, but we never talked about it because it was too terrifying, particularly because of their age. So I started journaling, and I started thinking about what that show would be, and I wanted to give it some distance. I didn't want it to be just therapy for me on stage. I wanted it to be a piece I could share and could help others have a conversation or have some sort of catharsis. So when I applied for a grant here in Minnesota, and I'm very grateful recipient of an Artist Initiative grant for the Minnesota State Arts Board. And through that, I was able to get the funding and hire artists to come in and work with me to create Expiration Date. And I knew, again, I didn't want it to be just about my experience or what my thoughts on death and dying in America. I wanted to interview caregivers and hospice workers, medical professionals, just community members about death and dying. So that was part of the process, and I just accumulated a lot of research, read everything, get my hands on, and became, some friends would come over to the house and see that my library books stacked up all about death or dying or the death industry, and be a little curious about what was going on. But I was just absolutely fascinated by our attitudes on death and how sanitized and terrifying it's become. in our society for the most part. So that's how the show started, and I did the first workshop of it last April, and it got a really fantastic response, particularly from the hospice and medical community that were able to come out, which is really great. Which really great for me, because I felt like you don't often get to see a really honest portrayal of something that you do for a living, something that honors that. And so that's how that started. I performed it a couple of times, toured it to a couple of non-traditional venues over the course of the year, and then decided to use the Fringe Festival as an opportunity to go back in and fix some structuring problems and some story problems that I felt weren't quite right yet, and hired a couple of new collaborators to come into the room with me and help kind of just tear it apart. Content's all pretty much the same, but we kind of tore it apart, restructured it, and just made it a tighter, cleaner show, and I'm super happy with it. So that's how I came to do what I did.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The South is in the play. What's the South giving you?
What's the South giving you? Well, that's my family. That's my sense of family. That's where I come from. And as much as I knew that I couldn't live there and have the life that I wanted to have, which is a very sad thing, because I'm very close to my family. I have 2 siblings, and my parents are both still live down in Mobile, where I grew up. Everybody's in the South except for me. So it is difficult being the only one that's left, but knowing that I can't do the work that I need to or want to do in that area. So for me to be able to, the perk of doing solo work is that you get to kind of filter in little things that you can really identify with and really grasp onto. And the mama character is based on my friend Katrina, who I lost, and who we all lost to another plane. But and then going back in to do figuring out the brother character, he wasn't quite so Southern, and he didn't identify that strongly. And then I realized if I'm gonna make her from the South, I may imagine her from a tiny town in New Orleans, Louisiana. That's where I lose from. Then it just gives you a really strong sense of family and a strong sense of where this person's from. So I just kind of pulled it in, and it's really made the piece even more personal for me, and gives me better kind of signposts to grab onto for the emotional arc, because it's a place as soon as I get down there I feel at home and comfortable, and I know that's part of my soul is just gets so invigorated by being there. And then also having parts of the South that I still am very uncomfortable with being in the middle of. But I guess it's a bit of a war in the South for me. It's a beautiful, comforting thought, and then there's also a feeling of sometimes disappointment of them not being quite as progressive politically as progressive as I would like them to be. A special place.
Your character in Expiration Date does a couple of, maybe more than a couple of scenes of kind of facing people down, sort of big time, the cut the crap kind of speech. Is that a mode that's comfortable for you and familiar to you? Is that how you are?
And I'm probably not quite as confrontational as Lou is. But I mean, the older that I get, the more comfortable I am with kind of just speaking my piece in a respectful way. But yeah, that's something I'm pretty comfortable with for the most part.
There's a wing of the work I want to do with lives in theater, which is kids who've gone to New York, try to make it as performing artists.
Mm-hmm.
I just admire them so much. My son is doing this, and his girlfriend's doing this, and I meet these people. It seems to take a level of courage I can't even imagine.
Oh, courage or stupidity or
Well,
the ability. I mean, I think it's a lot of it is just the. I mean, when I got to New York, I was just like, I was so young, and you're willing to sacrifice everything, and you have to explain that to people. You know, when you're living in an apartment, you would never live in any other city in the country, and allow that to be your quality of life. But it is such an exciting place to be. I mean, it's such a sexy city. I mean, you just kind of walk outside, and it's just, you can just feel the energy on your skin. It's just buzzing. It's a really, really beautiful place to be. I'm happy to not be living there full time anymore, but I miss it. And I love going back. And what's been great is, I mean, I think of New York as my grad school, kind of, you know, like I wouldn't be at the place I am now if I hadn't have worked with the people I worked with in New York, had to fight for what I wanted. I mean, that's the thing about being there, is that if you're there, especially having a job like an artist, something that doesn't pay very well, and you always usually have to work, you know, a job or two in addition to pursuing your creative passion. Either one or two things happens. I mean, you either become just so exhausted and you're like, it's not worth it, and you find something more stable and give up pursuing that full time, or it just makes it even more important the harder you fight for it, and you'll keep working no matter what. But I'm so grateful for the community I still have there. I mean, the nice thing about living there for so long is I have so many colleagues that I still work with, you know, playwright friends, other artist friends. I can go into town and, you know, stay with somebody for a month and work on a project or do a festival and not feel like I've completely given up my all of the work and all of the investment I've made there. Yeah.
Some of the people I talk to tell me, you know, I mean, their biggest complaint is that they're going to cattle calls where somebody wants a 5'2" tall blonde who weighs 115 pounds and can do a French accent and also neigh like a horse, you know. And they have enough people that they could just throw people away till they find that one. You seem to have found your way into jobs pretty quickly that gave you an astonishing amount of control and autonomy and such like. Is there a secret?
Well, no, there's no secret. The secret is that I went through years and years and years of those cattle calls and of, you know, standing in line waiting for my 3-minute chance to share a monologue, of, you know, seeing that posting for a 5'3", you know, funny-looking redhead who can do a great Southern accent and feeling like, yeah, this is my time, and then getting there and seeing 50 other funny-looking redheads in the room at the same time who do a great Southern accent. So, you know, it's like kind of, it can be dehumanizing. It can be very hard to balance and keep your sense of self throughout that. I think, I mean, for me, the secret was just that I just wasn't willing to give up, my call to be an artist, because people weren't handing me the roles that I wanted to do. For me, it became okay, fine, I'll do this myself. Nobody's going to trust me, you know, enough to let me work on a regular basis. Then I'm just going to have to create the work that I want to create. And that was such, and I'm such a, like, I get really antsy. I'm a really, like, proactive person. I have a hard time sitting still and not terribly patient of, like, waiting for things to happen. So, I mean, that's kind of in my nature. But then finally, once I started the ball rolling, I was like, it's incredibly gratifying to be able to, I mean, Expiration Date is the third show that I've produced under my company, Sunset Gun. The second show that I produced was a collaboration with a playwright friend in New York who I had an idea for a project, and we talked about it and collaborated, but he wrote the script and we toured that. So it's also like learning these skills on how to produce. I'm also able to work with the artists that I'm really excited about, and I think they're not getting produced enough or getting to work enough. So yeah, I don't know, the secret is just do it. Just do it. I mean, I think that there's a lot more of, I mean, in Minneapolis, definitely, there is a movement of just like not sitting around and creating your own work. There's a gazillion theater companies here. And sometimes it can feel like it's, oversaturated for the amount of audience we have. But on the other hand, it's so exciting because people are just so passionate about what they do and have a real, a push to share their unique view on the world or what they have to say. And I think that's the best way, especially for younger folks just kind of getting started, for you to kind of, either get involved with another company who does work that you enjoy and kind of learning all the aspects of it, not just standing on stage and being a performer. Because quite honestly, there's not very many of us that are able to work on a regular basis and just be an actor. I mean, that's just the thing. The more you diversify, the more skills you have. You're going to find things that you're really good at, you actually enjoy. And it doesn't feel quite as devastating when you're kind of sitting around unemployed working that temp job. So, yeah.
So is the basic idea, stop going to cattle calls and put money from your temp job into writing and producing something and see if anybody comes?
Well, I mean, it is a whole, it is a lot of work. It's a lot of responsibility. So it's not for producing isn't for everybody. But if you're, if you're frustrated with, always going to cattle calls, still go to the cattle calls. I mean, go to the cattle calls, still go to the auditions, still try to, get those jobs you want. I mean, I still work as an actor with other companies in town. For me, that's a great balance to be able just to walk in, just be an actor for just to have that one role in that production and let my brain rest with all the other administrative stuff. It's such a huge gift to balance that. So I still go to auditions in town and audition for folks when they call. So I think it's just a balance. Maybe go to the cattle calls, but yeah, if there's a friend who's a playwright who, like, once you guys want to get together and do a co-production at a small theater, why not? It also just keeps you busy, keeps your creative muscles moving, and instead of paying money to an acting class, why not use that money to produce your own show? You learn almost as much. Different things.
So what's the move from collaborating to writing like? I mean, you were working with a playwright for the initial piece, right?
Well, with the first two I had collaborators, but I wrote.
So you're writing all the way along. I guess I'm curious about the move to writing. Was that natural? Was it easy? Was it hard?
I think that I'm a performer first and a writer second. So a lot of what I learn about my characters and my writing is through performing it. I think this second version of Expiration Date is a much stronger show. The writing is much stronger than where I started a year ago, because I've had a lot more time to get up in front of audiences and be in those characters and say the words and kind of let my intuition tweak it. I never considered myself a writer, and when I decided to take on the project of Afterlife and creating 2 new characters, because Chris was like, hey, you can use this one. I was like, okay, I'm going to write 2 more characters. And they were like started out just as kind of like journals that I had written, like things that I was curious about. That's usually how a show starts for me. It's about I explore a topic, I explore a relationship, a feeling, something that confuses me or I'm really curious about, and I can learn about that through the process of researching, which I love, and just writing and riffing and talking to people. So it can be, I mean, to be honest, the writing part's not my favorite part, alone in the room. But it takes, it takes me kind of just like shutting myself into sensory deprivation, turning off the Wi-Fi, and just like going at it, and then it gets more enjoyable once things start to flow.
Tell me about research.
About research?
Yes.
So for Expiration Date, I just started collecting articles, just searching around online for all kinds of articles on death and dying, from patient's perspective, from caregiver's perspective, from doctor's perspectives. And it's funny, once you tell people you're doing research for a specific topic or that you're interested in it, then you get I'd get forwards all the time from people being like, oh, I just saw this great article, and have you read this book? So then, and just going to the library and scouring the card catalog for anything that seemed at all relevant, because when I was creating the show, I had no idea what I was doing. And at first, as far as an arc or a character or what I was doing, I actually, in the beginning, it was just going to be kind of vignettes, not a cohesive story of just experiences of people with death and dying, people who worked in the death industry, a character who was a hospice nurse. It kind of started out that way, and then as I did more research, I realized, or I started doing more interviews too with people, it felt to me that to be able to have people sit in a room and get to know one person and follow them through that process would be a much more meaningful experience than just seeing flashy vignettes. So then I kind of threw a lot of content out and streamlined it and made it into one character's arc and stopped worrying about having to tell every story. That's the problem with doing research, is then you have all of these things that seem so important to say or share with your audiences, and you have to kind of kill your darlings and throw some stuff out, or a favorite monologue. I still have a monologue that I threw out that I'm dying to use somewhere else. I love it so much, but it just didn't make sense in the show. But research for me, and even as a performer, especially with historical pieces or a place, takes characters from a place in the world that I don't come from and I don't get. I always have to have a really good sense of who that person is, what their life would have been, what they might have eaten for breakfast. I mean, those kind of things that don't ever show up in the performance in a really tangible or identifiable way are things that influence behavior for me and make, oh, well, if this, if they worn heels their whole life and they're, 45 now, maybe they walk a little differently because their feet are damaged. I don't know. Just like little things like that you kind of pick up. So I love that kind of research, and when I have that kind of a base and I have that kind of an understanding, then I can let go of a lot of intellectual processes and just kind of be present with the character.
Let go of a lot of intellectual process. What sorts of things do you let go of?
Well, just because I am impatient and proactive, and like sometimes it's hard to get your brain to turn off, right? Or thinking about, like, instead of thinking about, well, how would this person react to being told that she's got 6 months to live? And you can get up in your head and you can be like, well, they would, they would yell, oh no, and fall to their knees. Or maybe they would pound the floor. Or maybe they would just start crying. Or maybe you have all of these ideas in your head of which way the scene could go, how they would react to this. And it's a difficult thing to explain because I think it's such an internalized process. But for me, because I am a thinker and I overthink things, when I talk about doing all the research and kind of just having that in my body and understanding the rhythm of the character, it means I can turn my brain off. And it's not a conscious decision really how this character's gonna react. I give myself space just to like be in that moment, and then the reaction just comes out. Does that make sense? Probably not. It's hard to sometimes sometimes it's hard to verbalize your process, and things that seem second nature or make sense in my head are hard to verbalize.
Was it a hard decision to bring in, other characters? I mean, monologues are noticed differ how many characters are on stage. Some
Mm-hmm.
people carry it all in one voice.
Mm-hmm.
Some people drop into another voice
Mm-hmm.
maybe once in the monologue.
Mm-hmm.
You do it several times. How's that decision made? What goes into that decision?
Well, for this piece, it was imperative for me to have other voices in the show, because I wanted the story to come from different angles. I wanted you to see a bit of, even though you don't see the doctor character on her own in a scene dealing in her personal life, my hope is that you get a little flash of who she is and how difficult it is for those doctors to be in that situation all the time and do their job well and hold on to their humanity. And the having somebody in the death industry and trying to figure out, that was based on an actual interview I found of a woman who's a mortician in California, and I contacted her in the interviewer and asked them if they would be willing to let me use part of the story. It's like finding real people like that who are living, facing those decisions, facing death, facing terminal illness, facing life on a daily basis, they had to say. So for that piece, it was I knew that once I came to the conclusion I wanted to find a through line and narrative and follow one character, I did know they would meet other characters along the way. I think it gives it a more well-rounded, for this topic, it gives it a more well-rounded and kind of accessible way in.
Is it hard to keep focus? I mean, you're being one person,
Yeah.
then you're being the person that person hates. The object of annoyance.
Right.
Who that person is caricaturing
Uh-huh.
as, a kind of cartoon monster.
Uh-huh.
And then you have to go back to being that.
Yeah.
What's that like?
You know what? It takes an incredible amount of focus, and there's some days I don't do it as well as others. But for me it's a rhythm. There's a flow, and the only way I can get there is by, just rehearsing the hell out of it, and knowing, and not having to think about, oh, I'm supposed to be in this spot now. I'm supposed to rehearse it until it becomes really organic in my body, so I don't have to think about it. Instead of thinking it's kind of riding a wave, or a music scale where it's like, okay, follow this up and down, up and down, up and down. So for me, it's almost kind of like a sound score. And the characters all have different rhythms. Like the brother has a very different rhythm than Lucille does, who's more grounded, and a very different rhythm than the mortician, who's a little lighter and heavier and up here and a little twittery, and the doctor, who's very grounded and focused and straightforward. So for me, the key is kind of finding those rhythms, those energies, and and just trusting myself, getting to a place where I know what I'm doing, and I don't have to think about it anymore. That's the gift of a lot of the pieces in the Fringe are new pieces, like brand spanking new. The luxury I have is that this is a piece I've been working on for a couple years now, so I have a little bit more ease with it, I think, than some of the other, with a piece that I would have just started working on 3 months ago.
a story today from a 78-year-old actor who worked with August Wilson.
Oh, wow.
He was called in the last minute to take a role. He was panicked because he couldn't learn his lines.
Yeah.
And August said to him, just kind of quickly as he was passing him, you know, when I write this stuff, I hear music. And so we the actor went back to his hotel room, reread it. He wanted to hear whatever song August heard. When he finally got that straight, then he could do it. So I have to ask, with this in the background, do you hear music?
Do I hear music? You know, not in a traditional way. I mean, I the kind of the bluegrass and the country songs I use in the show, for me, that's like, that's a fun rhythm for me to grab onto, like when I kind of pulled in that music. But I don't, it's, no, not so much in the way that August was talking about, I don't think. It seems really kind of obtuse, but this kind of rhythm, this kind of energy that I find, it's more of a feeling, a beat, than it is like a traditional song. But the music I have in the show does help me. I do. I mean, I chose it for very specific reasons. So,
does a piece you perform for a long time have a particular arc for you? I mean, I imagine there's the first night terror, the second night terror. There comes, I can imagine that part of the arc is becoming somewhat less terrified, or terrified of different things. But I guess I'm curious about the history as you see it. You've gone through one other piece, or two other pieces this way, and long enough to have them evolve and change. Is there a kind of trajectory or journey that a piece takes for you?
You know, for me, it starts out as a brand new piece, and it's just about bumbling around and figuring out what that story is, and have you flushed away the unnecessary kind of accessories and gotten to the meat of the show. So there's the process of like kind of doing that, and I feel like with this piece I've gotten to that point where I'm really happy with the script and where we've landed, and that's really exciting because then I get to do the part that's my favorite, which is just get in there and play, and then you really get to know the characters on a more personal level. There are these little nuances that, now that I have this freedom, there are little nuances with all of the characters, and I'm excited to see what's going to pop up and what's going to happen. It's going to be weird. It's going to be some way they shake their hand, or it's going to be a tremble in the voice on a certain, consonant, or that's the cool stuff, all these little things that pop up. And what's really fun is that, Afterlife, so I've been performing Afterlife since 2008. And I toured it, I remounted it in 2010 here at the Red Eye Theater, and I hadn't worked on it for about a year, I think, since then. And it was so cool because I identified more strongly with one of the characters than before. All right, I understood something about what I had written that I didn't even get before. And I'm really excited. I'm actually remounting Afterlife in 2 weeks down in Plainview at the John Hassler Theater at the Adventure Theater Festival. It's a theater I'm co-organizing with some other theater companies in the John Hassler. But I'm super excited. I haven't even gotten into getting into the room this week because Expiration Date's up to kind of remount it and get it back in my body. But I'm so excited to revisit those ladies again and see what they have to teach me about where I am in my life and things that I didn't understand before or I didn't get before. So it's just the relationship becomes stronger with the characters for me. That's the strongest trajectories. This comfort level comes in where you're not worried about You're not worried about lines, you're not worried about being able to reach, an emotional arc or anything like that. It's not a concern. It's either just gonna happen or it's not gonna happen. It's gonna be what it is. But I'm gonna get to know these characters on a much deeper level, and and in a selfish way, that's just really, really cool for me. And I also think it just makes the audiences buy in, and they get more emotionally connected because they really believe who they're spending time with.
So you aren't ever an automatic?
I'm never not what?
An automatic?
Oh, well, I mean, to be honest, yeah, of course, but you do all of that work so that when there are times when you drop out, people can't tell as easily because it's in your body and you know how to kind of bridge and get there. I mean, in a perfect world, you'd never be an automatic, but life happens, things happen. Sometimes it's hard to. Sometimes a reviewer is sitting in the very first seat in the front row with their feet propped up on the stage, writing with a flashlight over their shoulder. True story. And sometimes it's hard to block that stuff out. So you get distracted for a few minutes and you think about, you're still talking and you're saying these characters' words, but you're thinking, what is he writing? He didn't laugh when I just said that line. Oh, now he's looking down and he didn't even see this good moment that I had. What's going on? And then you're like, oh shit, what am I doing? That's not the work I'm supposed to be, that's not the job I'm supposed to be doing right now. And can you reset and find something, for me, objects, tangible things kind of reconnect me, or or those kind of things will help me kind of draw back in. But no, of course, everybody loses focus. It's just about trying to figure out how to grab it back on it there.
I can't resist the mathematical question, I mean, there's this picture of learning, of exploration, of being right there at your nerve endings, with your consciousness right there, kind of watching to see what is coming out that didn't last time. Is that the usual thing for you? I mean, is that the usual way it is to be an actor? To be that alive?
I mean, that's why I love doing it, to be, that's the way I know how to do it. That's the way, and I think everybody has, that's why you go to school and you train, like you learn different ways that work for other people, or different ways in, or different tools, and but yeah, for me that's the most satisfying. And the type that, the work that I do is very different than sketch comedy, and or the just the genre of this piece is different than I did a French sex farce last year. I mean, my approach to that's going to be quite different than playing somebody who's got 6 months to live and how they're dealing with that. It's a kind of a different animal. The base is the same. I still need to know who that person is. I need to understand them on a really human level, but it's the connection will be different than when I'm working with Lucille. So it's probably varying levels of the spectrum of having to be that kind of tuned in and super hyper focused. But I try to approach all of any role or any work I do with that kind of the same approach, and then seeing what I have to adjust from there. And it's your question at all?
That's fine. That's fine. I suppose it's an ambiguous question. It's one question, of course, is this usual for actors, which I don't expect you to know in a million years whether it's usual for actors.
Yeah.
You'd have to know actors in enormous quantities, and we don't. But if it's usual, my question was really, is it usual for you to go at it this way? And I think your answer is yes.
Yeah. It's what works for me. I have my tools that I use to kind of get into somebody's skin, and that's yeah, what I found works best for me, to be honest and vulnerable and present on stage.
One thing, I'm sort of have a little bit of a vision problem. A little bit in the direction of Mr. Magoo, if that, I remember that. When people talk about learning from their audiences, I'm always a little puzzled. Because I can't, I mean, when I'm on stage, I can't see my audience. They could be doing anything. If they're backlit, they might as well not be there. So I guess, could you say a bit about what's involved in learning from an audience?
Sure, and there are at a space like Intermediate, I really love that piece, that space for solo work, because of the rake and the intimacy, the audience is right there, and I can see people's faces. So there is that, being able to check in with them and kind of know they're there when I do direct address to the audience and I'm speaking to them. But it's also not even about seeing them, it's about feeling. I mean, it's going to be one of my hippy-dippy explanations. It's about feeling the energy in the room. Like, I can tell from that first monologue how on board people are with a story, and if they're going to be willing to really be present, or if they're going to kind of sit back and put up a wall and just have a different experience. And you learn, easy things. You learn what people laugh at, what people don't laugh at. Especially if you get to work on a piece after a while, I'll have a line that I think is hilarious. And after 10 times doing the show, if nobody's laughed, maybe I should cut it. There's like really practical things like that you learn. Or if, there's just, as a writer, what's really cool, because I'm the writer and the performer, so I can adjust lines every night if I want to. And sometimes it has to do with different communities you go to. There are some things that, when I go to Canada, lines just don't make sense. They don't have that colloquialism. They don't have that turn of phrase. And I learned pretty quickly that, there's this, when I say it, there's that moment of confusion. I'm like, oh, they didn't get that. But I also just learn, the Fringe is difficult for this because the shows turn over so quickly. But I usually try to create an environment after all of my shows where it's an informal kind of reception, or a place where I can speak to audience. And in that way, it's a very direct educational component, because I get to listen to people tell me stories about their experience in the show, or what it made them think of. And for this show, it's particularly rewarding, because I feel like people are so emotionally available afterwards, and they usually want to tell me a story about their aunt they lost, or that they have cancer and it's what they're going through, or and there's a lot for solo work. In particular, there's just so much you're going to learn.
Well, can you make sense of your experience without something like telepathy coming in to clip it to the explanation? I couldn't actually see how. If your experience is of knowing after that first monologue what's happening, there aren't cues.
No, there aren't cues. People are, I don't know, like if you're giving a speech in a meeting, or you're in a meeting and you can tell people are preoccupied, sometimes it's as obvious as looking at the watch, or looking up at the clock, or twiddling their hands or fingers. But sometimes it's just, you can just tell people aren't there. And you can tell when it's hard to explain, but there is a point where if you've lost somebody in a show, if you've lost an audience, sometimes it can be hard to get them back in there. But you can feel it, it's just a shift where you're like, oh, I'm in this alone now. They've left the relationship.
Well, I know what you mean. I just have never been able to link it to any body language that I could expect myself to be reading.
Right.
In other words, I'm sure there's readable body language, but not as it were, with that much light on me,
Yeah.
not when I'm trying to concentrate on this many internal things.
Right.
No, I'm not reading body language. I don't know, maybe you are, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You get into the extreme end of it, which is like wrist slashing stuff, is where you can't get through you can't get the rest of the sentence out because you know that no one is listening. That is actually the nadir of it, I think. And I know as a teacher, as various kinds of performers, what that's like. Gee. I remember when my dad died, I was quite surprised that about the way that facts about death kind of took me over when I didn't expect it. And I had to have, for maybe a year or two, a phone line open for panic attacks, because it would happen, you know, and sometimes it was something on television I didn't expect, but it triggered that. So you're voluntarily, intentionally revisiting deaths you've experienced. Does it sneak up on you that way? Do you have, do you get backwash from it somehow?
Me too. It affects me in different times of the show. Every night there'll be, you know, there's three or four lines in the play that will just catch me off guard sometimes and knock the wind out of me.
And outside of the play?
And outside of the play, I mean, sure, there's still times. I mean, there's still times that I get, you know, I kind of shaken up, or I get a reminder, or I have a dream about my girlfriend, or something happens. I was like, oh man, it's too bad she can't be here. But I think with the time that's passed, it's fortunately for me has become usually celebratory moments. I've been able to turn those into celebratory moments instead of grief and sadness. Yeah. But I think probably working on this play has helped my process of that quite a bit. And dealing with interviewing people who are much more at peace with the life cycle, and who, you know, just having to kind of face it head on and not be quite so terrified of death, of the fact that, you know, someday my parents are going to die, and what's that going to mean? And, you know, who else as we get older, I mean, you know, I'm 37, so you get older, people in your life start, you know, one by one start kind of peeling off, and it's not gonna get any easier. So being able to kind of find these coping skills, or just being able to have a conversation about it, which is kind of my biggest hope for the show, is just starting a conversation about what that means for me, what that means for when I have to deal with that loss in my life, or what would I do if I was faced with this.
I've talked to a lot of people in visual arts, maybe more in theater, you know, sort of bringing up the word therapy. You get very different reactions. Some people are like, you've just hit them with a large, wet, cold fish. This is not therapy. I don't do therapy. That's other people. That's the stuff and other people say, I've been trying to explain to people that what I do is therapy, and it's good. And they give me all this grief, and that's what I'm here for, and I'll own that word. And I'm wondering what that word is for you.
You know what? A couple years ago, when I was, or last year actually, end of last year, I had a friend, a playwright friend, come in and watch and listen to the piece and give me some feedback, and the show wasn't as personal as it is now. I wasn't I wasn't being as vulnerable and drawing on as many things as I could to make it as emotionally available. And you know, I said to him, I said, you know, I am extremely conscious of this not being therapy for me on stage. Like, I think this is an important topic, and I don't want people to tune out because they're like, ugh, I'm gonna watch this girl, like, you know, go through this experience. Why am I here for this? You know, I don't need to be here for this. And I was also very conscious of it not being manipulative in any way. Like, the end game isn't to make people cry, it isn't to make people feel sad or you know, have a existential crisis. It's just to present this experience and hoping that you can come be in a room with this woman, get to know her, go through this process, and realize that there were also some really happy things that happened along the way, and there were also some really gratifying things, and it wasn't just about loss. So, but you know, saying that to him, and he's like, Candy, he's like, all theater is therapy. And it's coming from a friend who's a playwright. But, you know, I thought about it, and I don't believe that all theater is therapy, but I think that what he was trying to say and what I found is true is that if I don't, as a writer and as a performer, if I'm not willing to be vulnerable and letting some of my shit come into the room, then why do it? So I don't know how to directly answer that. Maybe, I guess maybe you could say it's a little bit of therapy. I think I've been able to, the process of doing this show, I've come to terms with some stuff in my life. But I don't, it's not my intention to go on stage and work through a bunch of catharsis. It's just to tell the story and see where it lands and how it sits with the audience. To have that experience with them. I feel like, I guess therapy means it's just very selfish act, you know? I guess that's the connotation that you bristle at, is that it's a completely selfish kind of internal act, and that's not what I intend. I intend to have a relationship and share the experience with the other people in the room.
I suppose maybe some people's selfishness gets shared and other people's selfishness is totally encapsulated. It's one of those gifts that God's dropped into our baskets. Must be a big decision what to work on when you know that you're going to live with it for 6 years, 10 years, like that. I mean, do you consciously say to yourself, am I willing to live with this topic for 6 years?
No, I didn't. I mean, I think what happens is I get excited about something and I really want to investigate a topic or, something I really am curious about that time in my life. By the time you get the funding, by the time you do all the research and you work on it and you get into the middle of it, sometimes, quite honestly, a year ago, after I finished this first workshop of this piece, I was like, what have I done? So I'm creating this piece that I'm going to do that's going to destroy me every night because the intention is to tour it I would love to tour it nationally and kind of like focusing on legal and medical communities. I'm getting really great response to take the piece there. And I was like, what have I done? I don't want to do this. But now I love the show so much, and I think it's such a beautiful journey, and I really really enjoy it. So yeah, I don't have as much forethought about it as I probably should. But if I choose something that I'm really is unpalatable and I don't like doing, I just won't do it anymore. It's a risk you take. But I think you got to jump on the passion and the curiosity when it happens. So if I lose that fire, then it's just not worth doing anymore.